Welcome to Startup TV Boston. I'm Michael McCarthy, and I'd like to welcome my guest, Vinod Parmeschwar. Welcome, Vinod.
Thank you, Michael.
Today, this is the Social Entrepreneurship episode. And with Vinod's help, we're going to share with you what is social entrepreneurship, how you can make a venture that's going to be pretty successful, and some pitfalls that we'd like you to avoid. I actually met Vinod a few months ago, actually, at Harvard Kennedy School for the Holt Prize. You were a judge.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy being a judge for the Holt Prize?
That's fantastic.
Could you share with us what the Holt Prize is? You've actually been involved with it longer than I have.
So the Holt Prize is a social entrepreneurship competitions for all you aspiring young social entrepreneurs out there, where you go through an intensive course where there are a lot of judges and mentors who help you take your idea from the germination level to something that is much more robust and well thought out, and you compete against some of the world's best, and in the end you choose a winner where the winner gets $1 million to actually go ahead and launch their social enterprise and try to make an impact on this world.
It's an incredibly interesting prize, and I ended up really stumbling upon it last year. I was hired by a group that became one of the finalists. And social entrepreneurship groups, they're startups. They tend not to have a lot of money. They ran out of money to pay me. but I love their idea. And I said, I think you kids can make it. Yeah. It was a group of three. It was a startup. It was called Musana Carts. And they were from Uganda. Natalie was from Uganda, and one of their partners was from France, and the third person was from Japan. And they were in the final five. Yeah. And I said to them, I want to keep working with you. What can we do? And I love to barter. And as a finalist, they got to go to the Clinton Foundation dinner. Yeah. And I said, I've never seen a former president before. I'd like to go. Yeah. And Muhammad Yunus was going to be there, a Nobel Prize winner, and I'd never seen a Nobel Prize winner. So I said, if you get me a ticket to that dinner, I will continue to coach you. And that's how we continued. And they didn't win, but they came in second. Yes. And I thought they did an amazing job, Yes,
it was a fantastic project. And it was nice to see them through their evolutionary process, going through different iterations of the ideas and progressively making and refining their model to become better and better.
It kept changing, and I'd love to be a part of it because I'll see things and do a little pivot, and someone else comes with an idea. So it's definitely the world as a whole made that, and all projects really.
Yes.
But back to our audience, in your words, what would you say is a definition of social entrepreneurship?
So for me, a social enterprise is exemplified by the use of business principles to solve a social problem that is also sustainable over the long run. So it has essentially three components. One, it has to tackle a pressing social need. Mm-hmm. Two, it has to use a business model that is viable, and it has to be sustainable over the long run, which means it has to be driven by profit, not by subsidy.
So it's not a nonprofit?
So for me, it can have components of there are again different models. You could use the revenue generated from the business to fund other nonprofit activities. Mm-hmm. But for me, the more likelihood of it being sustainable over the longer run is higher if it runs on a pure business model. The fact that the way the benefit accrues to the broader society is that it is tackling a social issue right at the get-go, it's what you would call in a compass, the north, the guiding north.
Understood. Okay, so a social entrepreneurship project is I'm starting a for-profit business.
Yes.
That can sustain itself.
Yeah.
That is doing something good for society.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds easy enough, but it's really not.
No.
I think a social entrepreneurship project is harder than a regular entrepreneurship project that's just simply trying to make money. What do you feel about that?
Yes. Part of the problem is because the objective of social gain is baked into the creation of the business entity, it puts a greater onus on you to ensure that the corporate behavior is in alignment with the mission. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's also gives you various degrees of freedom to then operate in a manner that is consistent with the mission, where you can plow back a lot of your profits back into furthering your mission and expanding your reach, as opposed to giving out dividends to shareholders, which is what a normal business enterprise would do.
Correct. And I feel that a social entrepreneurship project is harder than a straight entrepreneurship project, because with regular entrepreneurship, you just have to make a lot of money.
Yes.
The ethics may or may not be there. As long as you stay within the law, that's okay. And your profit margin, higher the better. And I think that's easier than, well, not only do I have to have a sustainable business, but I have to make the world better. I have to leave it better than what I found it,
Yes.
and I have to pay my own bills. So I find them more challenging, which is why I'm more interested in them.
Yeah.
Now for the interesting part. So many people I've met, usually younger people in their 20s, want to do a social entrepreneurship project. I love their hope. I love their enthusiasm. I love the fact that they're willing to give back to the world much sooner than when I was ready to give back to the world. And I want to help them.
Yes.
But I find a lot of them come with really cool ideas, but they're not going to work. They're misguided on certain levels because they're not looking at reality. And I'm wondering if you can help us with, what would you say were a few guiding principles that every social entrepreneurship project should be mindful of from the beginning, that all of them must have these components to be successful? Do you have a short list you could share with us?
So I can share a few ideas. So one of the things would be that something is not good enough if it is just the right thing to do. This is a common thing that I see, where a lot of young hopeful people, and we are grateful for their hope and their desire and ambition to change the world for the better, but that by itself is not going to convince investors and venture capitalists to actually invest, and these enterprises do need the initial money to get them off the ground.
So just because I'm a good-hearted person and I'm doing a really nice thing, it's not enough.
That is necessary but not sufficient.
That's a very nice way to put it. It's very diplomatic. Necessary but not sufficient. Okay, so it's one component.
It's one component. And so one of the things, the other thing that we look for is actually a robust business model. Typically, the people who are attracted to this are either they fall in multiple categories. Either it's a social visionary who is looking at a social problem and wants a solution but does not have the business background, or it's a technological person who believes that technology is going to solve all the social problems and doesn't have any idea of the actual bottlenecks to operationalize that in a developing country context. Or you have somebody who has the business background and the technical chops, but is not aware of actually the social constraints to making it work, where you are underestimating the behavioral changes needed to ensure appropriate product adoption, as well as sustaining it in the longer run.
Okay. Understood. Now, these are the people who feel that they have the solution, as well as people who could be the funders or the people that are looking for that solution.
So these are the people. So now it is far more common to find people with existing solutions to social problems than people with available funding. So
yes,
there are a lot more people with a lot of ideas, and many of them sometimes are not at the level where they need to be before investors can invest in them.
What are some of the common things that you've seen when they get in front of an investor, they get shot down? Are there some common things you've seen where you're like, again, you're not ready because of this reason? Are there some common things that people should be mindful of to watch out for?
So one of the important things that I look for all the time as a judge is something called burn rate. Everybody knows that the business is not going to be sustainable or profitable from day one. Just not possible. We know there is going to be some initial, what we call sunk cost. The question is, what is going to be your pathway to profitability? How long is it going to be before you break even and recover your costs? And consequently, what is your cash flow? How much cash is being generated by selling of your product that allows you to then run a negative balance? And how long is that going to last before you actually break out and then come into the green and are able to then run it viably over a longer period?
And why is that important to you?
Because if you do not have an appropriate estimation of that, you will run out of money, let's say in year 1 or 2, and then you are essentially bankrupt. You might have a great product, but if you have not planned appropriately, then you will just run out of all the money, and then you will have to shut shop.
So it sounds like if you don't know how much money you need and how long you're going to need it until you can become sustainable, you don't really know how much money to ask for. You also don't know how to give reasonable expectations to your investor of, hey, it's $1 million and it's going to be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years before you get your money back. So without knowing your burn rate, not knowing how much money you need or how long you're going to need that for, you cannot give reasonable expectations to your investors.
Yeah.
And that's actually not fair to give them, to not even know those answers.
Which brings me to my second point, which is the conundrum, which is again where I talk about the necessary and sufficient. Having a robust financial projection is a necessary thing, but it is not the thing that will sell your product and allow the investor to invest. Because having a great financial, so a pure cold-blooded investor would invest, but ultimately what catches people is, what is the emotional hook? Why am I doing this? Why are you as an entrepreneur invested of all the different issues that are afflicting the earth at this moment? Why have you chosen this geography and this issue, and why do you think this product will work? That's the thing that will get people's attention, your personal commitment and your team composition. You yourself don't have to know everything, but do you have somebody who can run the math for you? Do you have, if it's a technological solution, do you have a chief technology person who will handle the technology? And if you are the marketing person, then are you making the right marketing pitch, which allows people to connect? This is the pressing need of the moment, and this is the problem I as a person need to solve. And I've assembled this team with me who are all equally committed to this, and we will make it happen.
So the idea, a really good idea, that's actually going to make the world a better place, that's the number one thing that you're looking for. And the second thing is the team that can actually pull it off.
Yeah, there is a classic saying which says that an A team with a B plan will always succeed, but a B team with an A plan will never make it.
Yes, we teach that in our entrepreneurship class, and it's true.
Yeah.
It's actually true. I think there's another saying of, you could have a lousy product with a great marketing plan, and that's going to be better than a great product with a lousy marketing plan. I've actually had that experience myself. It's actually true. Just because it's great doesn't mean that anyone else is aware of that.
Or just because this is another problem we see where people come up with amazing products, but then the thing is they have never pilot tested it. They have never talked to the actual consumers who will be using that product. And then they come and make pitches, and my first question is, have I piloted it? And they are like, no. And I'm like, then you are not serious. Because you actually don't know what your client is going to say. And I've worked in a lot of these developing countries. So if somebody comes to me with an app for a smartphone that they have developed here in Cambridge or Boston, in MIT or Harvard or somewhere like that, I'm like, yeah, interesting, but you're not the first person to try it, neither will you be the last. But what makes me sit up and take notice is if you say, okay, I went to Uganda, or I went to Kenya, I went to Vietnam, I went to El Salvador and tried it out, and this is what I have found with my pilot trial with like 50 users, 500 users. Something that shows that, and this is the reason why we chose the geography, because X member on our team is from there. We understand the geography, we know how to troubleshoot. There has to be some connection for why that is meaningful and relevant.
So you actually have to buy a plane ticket, go to that country that you're going to serve, and actually get on the ground and do it.
Absolutely.
Now, that can be a little intimidating for people. So I'm going to ask you my next question. How big does your pilot have to be? Let's say, well, for Musana Carts, they had a food cart idea. They had a very nice model where they could double the income of the food vendors. And how big of a pilot would they need to do for you to say, yeah, you can talk about this intelligently, it's more than an idea?
So for me, it's less about the size of the pilot as opposed to what has been done with the pilot. So for example, in Musana, one of the interesting things for me was the fact that they had managed to actually create a more robust, what we call ecosystem, which is just a mapping of all the players that have a bearing on your success or failure as an enterprise. So in Musana's example, they had managed to strike a deal with the local municipality so that people who were signing up for Musana cards would have their taxes paid, and the municipality would know that these are legitimate cards. And so it allows you to tap into different players, and it also allows you to troubleshoot, so that if you run into any problems with any corrupt agencies or individuals on the ground, you have the local administration's backup. They can actually help you out. So the more you have a developed ecosystem with different partners who bring different things to the project, the more serious it is, rather than just pure numbers.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was coaching Musana, and they told me that they had gotten the food certificates, the food licenses, which had never existed in Uganda before. They got them so that they would stop having to pay bribes.
Yes.
And then I advised them, I said, would you ask the municipality to create a limited number of licenses and buy them all?
Yeah.
So now you have a monopoly. And they did. They had 100,000 food licenses. They had them all. So if anyone else wanted to come in, because obviously you'd be asking about competitors.
Yes.
Well, it's very easy to make a food cart.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get a license if you have them all.
Yeah.
So I think it is interesting that you do have to be the boots on the ground, because when I first heard the Musana pitch, it really didn't occur to me that you'd be bribing officials when you had a legal business.
Yeah.
But that was the environment that they were working in. So I think that is very good advice, that you have people, they have to actually do a real pilot and come back with some experience. They don't have to make the entire business. What other things have you seen that they should be doing that would give them a leg up?
So one of the critical things for me, again, in a team is the ability to pivot, because you will always be learning things, ideally, from the field or the pilot. And so there are two things that go hand in hand. One is any kind of feedback loop that you have set up to actually learn from your clients and your channel how the thing is going, what needs to be fixed, what can be better. And then how do you then utilize the data that is coming in into useful information for decision making so that you can pivot. And a pivot is just a change that you make to your business model based on your existing identified strengths. So I know that I do this well, but my business model is not working because my costs are too high or my revenue stream is not robust enough. So you pivot the model so that you either add a new product to enhance your revenue, or you drop something or source it from a different supplier to decrease the cost. And you keep adapting your model to make it increasingly better. So first things, what is necessary is you need a feedback mechanism. What exactly are you getting back from your pilot? So instead of the size, I would focus on that mechanism. It's like, what is your mechanism for gathering information, your eyes and ears on the ground, to know what's happening? The second part of it is, once you get that, how are you as a management team absorbing that information and then turning that, incorporating that into your business model? And the successful teams are the ones that are able to make that loop work over and over multiple times.
When we do the pivot, I help teach entrepreneurship at Harvard, and we always tell our students, the business that you start is not the business that you end up with, and your customers will tell you what business you're in. So the pivot is exactly what you're talking about. And one thing that I come up with just to keep things memorable for the students is a word called DICE. What do you need to decrease? What do you need to increase? What do you need to create? What do you need to eliminate? And I found the best pivoters have the smallest egos. And the people that come in and say, this is the business I started, this was my idea, this is what I'm going to do, they don't make it because they won't pivot, they won't change. And when they say things like, the customer's wrong, that's scary.
That's a wonderful point you make, because this is another problem that I have seen working with multiple teams across many different prizes, team dynamics. Whenever there is one strong person who threatens to override everyone, that for me is a red flag, because that team is not going to go far. And they ultimately break apart somewhere during the middle of the accelerator or the course that they are in, or once they've already set up the pilot, because you have somebody on your team who is in charge of driving the bus who is not a good listener. So how teams actually manage their internal dynamics and the composition of the team. So for me, even when I'm judging a group, like depending on where people stood while making the presentation and who talked for how long and the kind of words that they use and how they answer the questions among themselves gives me a clear indication into their team dynamics, which for me is a direct indicator of whether or not this team is going to stick together as a team, which has got a significant bearing on the enterprise. Because more often than not, many investors take a bet on the team, not on the product.
Yes.
Because like you said, the product you end up is not the product you start with. So essentially, you are betting on the team.
You're right. Yeah, with that logic, yeah, you're absolutely right. So are there things that you look for, or actually for everyone that's doing a startup, obviously they pick a team, they want it to do well from the beginning, everyone has good intentions. Are there things that you can guide these startups in the beginning of things to look out for on kinds of team members you want and kinds of team members that you don't want?
So for me, that is a more complex exercise, because one of the things is you have to kind of balance the hard and the soft skills, so to speak, because you do need the chief technology person, you do need a top-notch finance person, you need your marketing person. And for me, those are things that take a lot longer to learn than these other ones about getting along better with each other, which for me, there are a lot of management tools that you can use to increase team efficiencies, which because many of them come from a non-business background, or even if they come from a business background, they might not have had exposures to. So there are tools available out there that when I'm working with the teams, I equip them with that will allow them to actually streamline their processes for how they are going to make decisions internally and how they are going to park and track issues over a period of time.
Okay.
So there are things like issues logs, decision logs. There are things that can allow you to operate at a higher level of efficiency, because every team at some point of time is going to have a fight. It's guaranteed. Question is, what mechanisms have you been trained on that you can use to get yourself out of the fight to a productive place, as opposed to it turning into full-blown out conflict, which is destructive.
Now, I help our Harvard students develop teams, because when they're in a class, they have to make teams of 3 to 5 people. And I usually tell them, in a team of 5, you're going to have 2 people do most of the work. Person number 3, doesn't matter if they showed up or not. Persons 4 or 5 are either negative, or they try to change things, they become a problem, and you almost wish that they weren't a part of the team. So out of a team of 5, really 2 are the entire engine. And I've found, and I'd like your opinion on it, I have found that if people have similar value systems, such as I show up on time, I meet my deadlines, I make my commitments, I'm honest, you need to have that as a base. And then from there, you need to have what I call rainbow strengths. Meaning, if you're the creative guy, I should be the accountant. It's not okay if we're both the creatives.
Yes.
We all need to be a little bit different. And I found even if we have rainbow strengths, if you're the accountant, I'm the creative, and everything's great, if we have different value systems, such as you show up on time and I'll show up if I have something, if there isn't anything better to do, that won't work. That eventually, and I'm just curious if you think there's anything to what I've noticed. It's not formal, I've just sort of observed it.
So there are things called the trust equation of what enables people to build trust. So it has got multiple components, like is it a question of integrity? Is it a question of intent? Or is it a question of competence? Or is it just a question of effectiveness? So you can evaluate each other on those 4 different components and find out where is it that the trust is breaking down. Because normally it will break down from one of those 4 things. So the question comes as, do you doubt that person's integrity?
Okay, so number 1 is if you're having a breakdown, is it with the integrity of the person you're having an issue with? So it's honesty issue.
It is honesty. The second thing is the intent. Are they trying to sabotage you? Or like, what is exactly happening? Why did they do it?
What are their motivations?
Exactly.
Okay.
The third thing is competence. Does the person have the skill set to do something? Or maybe they are just incompetent. They mean well, they have good intentions, But
they don't know where, they don't know how to do it.
or it could be like they have all of these and they are competent, but their effectiveness is not good, which means they probably don't turn up on time, or they are not delivering the product on time. They have the capacity to do it, but something is happening where they are not delivering. So
They're too shy, they're not on time, they're missing the bus.
and so
Stuff.
it allows you to then have a more objective conversation around, look, I do not doubt your integrity, your intentions are good, you have the competencies and the chops to do this job, but I'm not comfortable with the fact that you're not delivering on time. Your effectiveness is under question, which is pulling the whole team down. Let's have a conversation around it.
So instead
And that
of
is
talking,
contributing to breakdown of trust between us.
what I like about that is instead of attacking the person, you're attacking the very specific issue of you're great, you're an honest person, and you're competent, you're able to do this, and your motivations are in the right spot. However, you never get here on time because you keep missing the bus because you...
I don't know.
I don't know, but we love you, but you're not here.
Yes.
Okay.
And
like
the
that.
most successful teams are teams that have figured out how to actually let underperforming people go. You cannot build a great enterprise without letting underperforming people go, because if you continue to have underperformance in your group, the more motivated people who are doing well will also get demotivated because they see others free riding on the system. It is critical and imperative that people who are not performing are let go immediately.
That is an interesting reason why to let go of underperforming people, because they're going to drag down and demotivate your high performers. I never thought of that.
So in my experience managing teams, when to take your example of 5, if I had the same team of 5 with 2 performing, so what I have found is like if you fire the person who is not performing the least, it automatically motivates the better ones to say, oh, I guess there are consequences for not performing. And the people who are a little blasé and just treading water are also more motivated because they don't want to be next.
Yeah, there's one chair missing.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. So are there any social entrepreneurship startups that come to mind where you think that they're just the stellar example, the gold standard that people should be modeling for when they go out to make their own social entrepreneurship venture?
I think the one where Grameen started off by introducing, looking where Mohammed Yunus saw the problem of night blindness in Bangladesh. And that is very inspiring, because then you went to a business-based model where he then found out, okay, all of them are eating yogurt. What do you do to then put in some vitamins there? And it was all reversible, where you found out, okay, it's all just vitamin A deficiencies. If you add it in a product that everybody consumes regularly, you can make a profit and at the same time have a huge amount of social good.
So the background problem was, correct me if I'm missing any of this, is that children were going blind at night because they had a vitamin A deficiency in their diet. When the sun came up the next day, they could see just fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the question is, do you then go out and launch a massive government-led program, or do you do it in a way that is more market-based, where, please remember, all of these people still bought their own product. Nobody gave it to them for free.
So in the 1 minute we have left on the show, is there a book or a Google reference we can leave with our audience where they could take a look at this story? Because it's a fascinating story, and I heard it from Mohammed Yunus himself.
I heard it from him himself too, so I don't actually recollect a name of a book.
Well, I guess if you Google Mohammed Yunus.
Yes, if you Google Mohammed Yunus, night blindness, and Bangladesh, I'm sure it will come up, the example.
That's it. Everyone's got Google.
Yeah.
Vinod, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity.
And everyone who's watching the show, I wish you very well with your social entrepreneurship venture. Take care.
Good luck, everyone.